Good evening, everybody. Sorry here. I know, want to be respectful of time. 6:30 was the start time. We are streaming this and it will be recorded for those who are able to come today but may have an interest. If you have somebody who asks you, please direct them to our YouTube channel and they will be able to find this recording there. Few housekeeping issues. There are washrooms that are accessible. If somebody does need to go, it's just out the door to your left. There are auxiliary members who are there who will be able to direct you to where the washrooms are, and they will direct you to come back. Because most of the doors are locked, but there are a few things that we're trying just to make sure that people aren't wandering through the building. The building is in a bit of disrepair as they start to take it apart, and there are wires hanging from the ceilings of things that would be a hazard otherwise. This is the best room in the building. This is the room that we've said, please leave this room intact. Which is why we've asked for them to, and why we're hosting this meeting here. So you will see, this will ultimately be the police service board for where we'll hold those meetings. They have to be accessible to the public, as you know, and currently we're not very accessible. That is a requirement under the Police Services Act, and I will get to there. Aside from the housekeeping, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. I expect about half of the time, if not more, will be dedicated to free flowing questions and answers. We'll just ask everybody to just be respectful of time. We'll move from question to question. And then if we come back, if you have another follow-up question, we will come back to you. But we would like to give people an opportunity to ask questions. We also heard loud and clear last year that some people love statistics. I'm one of those people. And some people did not like statistics. In fact, the word was, we don't care about our statistics. We'll just get to the money. So if you really, really want statistics, you're not going to see them. Unless you really ask nice and have a bunch of built-in backup slides that I don't intend to spend time on, unless you ask for some of that. In which case, I'll happily share that with you. So what we've done is cut this presentation down to 15 slides. That's it. 15 slides to give you where we are, how we got here, what we're asking for the future, and what the risks or vulnerabilities are associated to that. And then we'll open that up for Q&A. We get started. Sound is okay? Everybody can hear it back of the room? Perfect. So today's presentation on our budget, and as we know, policing and public safety, it is powered by people. Without people, public safety is at risk for in a policing community where we are here, in any community. And over the last decade, with the exception of the last 2 years, the Peterborough Police Service budget has been capped at approximately 3%. 2023 marked the first departure from that, where it was at 4%. And you'll recall from those who were on council and those who are following this in the news, and we have some folks here from the paper and from the media, 4% included an $830,000 deferral that was at that time forecast that this will come back. There will be a cost to defer because 4% did not reflect the cost of policing. That's just a reality of where we are in terms of the pressures on police. Now, 2024 was a big year. 2024 was the first big investment in public safety in the city in more than a decade. And that was at 15.3%. And I'm going to show you what we got for a return on that investment. 2025, this current calendar year, was another big investment. Not as big as 2024, but a big investment. And those investments continue to pay off. So here's how we got here. 2023. I inherited the budget in 2023 because I came in January 2023. I had nothing to do with creating a budget, but I inherited the budget. As we can see, we had about 36,000 occurrences. So an occurrence is a report stemming from a call for service. One call for service could result in multiple occurrences. So if we think about an impaired driver, could also have been driving a stolen car. So there'd be 2 occurrences, 2 reports associated to that, 2 different charges. Out of those occurrences, we saw 2,800 arrests and 4,500 charges. That was 2023. The city made a big investment in public safety in 2024. Calls for service went up, occurrences went up. Those things we can't necessarily affect, but arrests were up at 26%. 26% was the return on that investment in public safety, and charges went up by nearly 24% on that same period of time. So 2025, as we've continued to put processes in place, we've continued to modernize, we've continued to become more efficient, we continue to see another investment in public safety. And we are currently sitting at 29% more charges at this time, September 30th, than we were at this time last year. So for your investment, you're seeing a 29% return on that investment. And I don't know too many investments where you're getting 29% return. We're seeing a nearly 29% return on the charges. We are arresting more, we are charging more. And that's what we get when we invest in policing and public safety. Now, the calls for service and the occurrences, they're both up by just approximately 2% so far this year versus where they were at the same time. But this is what your return looks like. Now, what else is driving the budget? This is a big one I've been talking about since I got here. There is a new police act, the Community Safety and Policing Act. That is new legislation that directs how policing will be done in this province. We have no control over that. It is the law of the land, and there is nothing that we can do about that other than comply. And compliance really isn't an option. It has to be done. And it will take a long time to get compliant. Because the magnitude of change, not just for Peterborough, but for policing across this province, is significant and severe. And we are trying to get there, and we're doing it incrementally so as not to hit everything all at once. And quite frankly, we don't have the capacity to put everything in place all at once. We're moving on to the health awareness training. So that training alone is going to cost close to $250,000 just to provide that to start up for year one. And that has to be done every year. The investment of $250,000 won't be there every year because that's hardware and software. But then it includes time for training, includes a week away from the road so that officers can receive that training. It's an ongoing annual commitment to training over and above the other training we already get. There's cultural competency training. That's a minimum of 8 hours, divided into multiple segments within that training, if you will. That's another 8 hours of training. When officers are doing that training, they're not on the road. When they're not on the road, somebody has to be paid to backfill them not being on the road. Because putting police on the road isn't an option. De-escalation training factors into everything we do. There's new enhancements around that. New enhancements around use of force protocols. New equipment that has to go into the trunk. Every police car. We don't control that. It is in the legislation. Right down to what the officers in our tactical unit have to wear. They list it all the way down and right to their underwear. What it has to be. Because it has to be fire retardant. And so everything that they are required to have is in there. Now I have a slide and I can tell you it costs just over nearly $14,000 just to put a uniform on a police officer today. We don't make that up. That is what we are required to do. We know that there's increased expectations around community engagement. There's increased expectations around crisis intervention training. We know that now every supervisor has to have critical incident command or critical incident management training. At every level, it's a new course. And a new course means another week of training. So a staff sergeant requires training over and above a sergeant. An inspector requires that. And the way the legislation is written, if they don't have that training, they can't be promoted. So we can't defer that training if we have a vacancy that needs to be filled at supervisory rank. Again, we would love to be able to work and try and find ways around or defer some of these things. It's just simply beyond our ability. We know there's new investigative training techniques that are required. One of the things we've been doing, and if you haven't joined one of our police service board meetings, they are open to the public, is we've been showcasing sort of what the different units in this organization are required. Last month, we featured what is required to be in our hate investigation and our criminal intelligence area of the organization. The training is significant. We have special constables, they do the court security. You're going to hear a little bit more about that. Special constables now require 5 weeks of training. That was never in existence prior to this new policing act. For me to train all the special constables we have and provide court security, because that's mandated in the policing act, I would need the equivalent of 2 full-time employees to get everybody trained this year in that new training requirements. So these are the pressures. Now, aside from those pressures, the community pressures that fed and built the board's strategic plan. Bless you. Our new strategic plan, which came out last year, that is fed directly as a result of community input. This was built around a center of trust and confidence in policing by enhancing our community safety, as I talked about in regard to that. Our clearances are up, our arrests are up, all of those metrics are up, and I can also tell you that our response times to priority 1 calls, so those would be emergency calls where we do see police going lights and sirens, they've actually decreased by 1.5 seconds in the last year as we've continued to modernize and make things happen. Now I asked that, and you might say, okay, well, big deal. But it's at 7.5 minutes from the time somebody calls in to the time an officer arrives on that door. It's 7.5 minutes. That is a decrease of 1.5 minutes from the same period of time last year. It may not feel like it for the one calling 911, but I can promise you it has gone faster. And that, when you start to see what's happening in policing in this province, is a significant response. When you look at what Sean was talking about, when they're saying, hey, it's going to be 15, 20 minutes before we get there. You have other police services saying, we probably get there in an hour or 2. We're getting to those life and death calls in 7.5 minutes because we're working on enhancing community safety. And that's what we do. We deploy the resources necessary to process and prevent and solve crimes. One of our biggest success stories that we were able to implement, thanks to the budgeting increase in the investments, was our community first. Those are the folks who you see downtown with bright yellow or bright orange or green clothing that are down there arresting the shoplifters, property crime. That group of 4 officers themselves have made more than 460 arrests so far this year, just dealing with those crimes. And they can't keep up with demand. But it is a significant impact, and what it has allowed us to do is free up those officers into cars so they can get to those priority calls faster. One thing feeds into another. None of this is a standalone initiative or standalone product, which is why this entire diagram is a Venn diagram, because it all overlaps. Now, part of our commitment is commitment to technology. We have to engage with technology. Each and every one of us in our personal lives and our work lives, we are all interacting with technology. I don't have a cell phone up here, but I can tell you, each and every one of us probably has a cell phone or 2. I have 2. Every time we deal with something, we need to get into that cell phone. We need to get into those computers. We have increased our CCTV presence downtown, and we will increase our CCTV presence in this city even further this year. And there will be more to follow on that. And that's thanks to provincial funding, provincial grant funding. So that's going to introduce the ability for us to do some pretty exciting things around identifying who's coming in and out of our city when they're committing those crimes. You've heard me talk about how many of our serious crimes are being committed by people who are coming here to commit those crimes. They don't reside here in many cases. So you'll hear more about that. There's been a great demand for body-worn cameras. Well, last board meeting, I announced that we would be, I think it was in the newspaper, that we would be introducing a pilot program for body-worn cameras because there's been a demand for that. But I'm not just introducing it to the whole organization. I need to assess what are the impacts on the organization at the back end. Because every time I add an officer to the front end, there is a back end implication in terms of getting that evidence processed and getting that evidence to court. It is not negotiable. The big piece here is we're moving over to our own IT department and moving away from the city's IT to a police-specific IT. And that is absolutely necessary for more efficiency and effectiveness of policing. That is our mandate, that's our responsibility. And already we have been able to make significant strides in those areas. And in fact, by the end of this year, we will be on our own IT system, and that will help us significantly enhance what we're doing. And finally, we can't do it if we don't have people who are healthy and people who are well. There is a lot of discussion about the number of cops who are off sick or the number of police who are on WSID. They tell you we have less than 5% of our organization, of our sworn members, who are off work with any form of PTSD. The provincial average hovers between 10 and 12%. And we're less than 5%. Because we focus on our people, we try and keep our people healthy. Because when our people are well, they can serve the community well. So what do we need for 2026? This is what we need. So in 2025 budget, we were asked to reduce the budget 5%. That was 2 officers. When we said at that time, that will be a deferral, but not something that we can't continue to defer. So we will be looking at adding 2 more of those 2 officers to this year's budget. 1 in the detective office and 1 in the front line. The rest of the staff here are civilian members because we continue to load up the front end and the back end is buckling under the pressure. We are behind now in records checks. We were as less than 5 days to turn around people's background checks. That's significant when you're applying for a job, where you're trying to volunteer, trying to do something in your kid's school. Our digital evidence management is falling behind. As I said, every one of us has a computer, has a cell phone. Every time we go to court, there's an expectation that there will be digital evidence that's included in that disclosure. The Chief Justice of Ontario has laid out disclosure timelines. We have no way around that. We have to meet those disclosure timelines. There is case law that says how quickly a court case has to get from the time a charge is laid to the time of his trial. But we don't have any wiggle room. It is a constitutional, and now it's shrouded by the Supreme Court of Canada decision, R versus Jordan, says they have to get to court at this time or the case will be tossed. And we've seen some pretty high-profile cases in other jurisdictions where they've had to withdraw things around sexual assaults, some of the most heinous types of crimes, because they haven't been able to get those disclosure and get things done in time. As I said about our own IT, we absolutely need to have an IT member. And that should probably be it for a while because of the other efficiencies and automations we've been able to make in that area. Again, we need to move up police recruitment. We have recently attained a national recognition for our innovative recruiting strategies, and our recruiting and talent acquisition coordinator, she's here with us today. But that is something we have national recognition shortlisted for what Peterborough is doing in regard to how they are recruiting talent to their police service. Problem is, as we continue to recruit, sometimes we see people retiring because we're hitting away work. We have many officers who are retiring, civilian members who are retiring, members who are moving from one area of the organization to another, because somebody has to manage that. Electronic forensic analyst has a person with cell phones. We absolutely have to have that. We are drowning in cell phone data. And it is unbelievable what we are seeing in terms of the volume of workload. A couple of board meetings ago, they said, are they available on those presentations available on the board site? No, okay. We did presentation. This is why we encourage you to go and watch the board or tune into those board presentations on what goes into an electronic analyst workload. Court security officer. So you're going to see here, the police of jurisdiction, that's us, are required by law to provide court security. We have technically three buildings in Simcoe. We have, for the provincial, we have the 200 Simcoe. 200 Simcoe? The courthouse, the main courthouse? 70 Simcoe. So 70 Simcoe, and then of course we have Superior Court up on the hill. We have to provide security for those three locations, during court hours and after. That is by law, by legislation. We have no option for that. And recently, we just had new directions come down through the justices and through the province, dictating even tighter and even more strict court security requirements. We simply aren't able to maintain that pressure, and we are not alone. We are fortunate, and I know T is going to talk a bit about the money, and spoiler alert, we do get grant money from the province for that. It covers about 60% of the cost, but we're required for 100% of the security. Because the way the legislation is written is the police of jurisdiction, where the courthouse exists, is responsible for providing the security. It's not a joint venture. Just because the OPP bring their people there, they aren't required to provide any security to that facility. That falls on the police of jurisdiction because we happen to have a courthouse here. And every other jurisdiction is finding the same thing. And the province has a certain pot of money that they provide for court security. And that pot has not gotten bigger, but the demands have gotten higher. So every year they divvy up who's going to get what money. And we've been fortunate, but other services, when ours goes up, others are coming down. And at some point, that is a risk for us. And Tia's going to talk about that. Records, as I talked about, is another area where we need somebody, our FOI and digital evidence management, 2 more locations. And as you saw on the first slide, we are seeing an increase in calls for service. So we need to increase our communicators. We'll look for 2 part-time. The reason for part-time is flexibility in staffing. We're deploying them when we need them. 1 person is just simply 1 human being. We need 2 part-timers so we can deploy them more strategically across a 24-hour period to ensure we have the greatest amount of coverage. So I'm going to turn it over to Tia to talk and walk through a little bit about what does that mean in terms of dollars and cents.
Good evening, everyone. I am Tia Lee, the Finance Manager at our police service. Thank you for joining. We all feel it. We are paying more at the checkout, a lot more for a loaf of bread, and the loaf is smaller. That's inflation and shrinkflation. With our police service, we are committing to the opposite, more value, not less. Every dollar invested will give you results. Safer street, faster response, and fewer repeat calls. In short, no shrinkflation. We will report our progress and adjust based on what works. Our goal tonight is clear. Transparent information about what's in our 2026 operating budget and why. We use a zero-based budgeting process this year. Every line item must justify against mandates, desired outcome, and assess risk. Our budgeting process begins in April, continues through the summer, and typically concludes in September. This slide shows you how we plan to spend 2026 operating budget. The left chart, the big picture, personnel services, $42.2 million, representing 88% of our total budget. Other operating costs, $5.7 million, representing 12% of total budget. Our services are people-driven. Out of every $100 spent, $88 funds staff who deliver services directly to you. $9.90 supplies the materials and equipment they need. $1.40 support training that keep our services safe and compliant. 50 cents cover vehicle maintenance by public works. And last but not least, 20 cents is set aside in reserves to manage future obligations. Let's break it down further. The $9.90 must cover IT systems, cyber security, cloud, digital evidence, radios, NG 911 system uptime and support, police equipment, uniforms, office supplies, fuel, fleet repairs, insurance costs, and legal services. In short, $1 in our budget is 88 cents people, 12 cents everything else to keep them safe and effective. What we did before asking, we pursued grants opportunities and increased other revenues. We increased total revenue by $555,167 and reduced base pressure by 0.5%. We want to flag a major budget risk in 2026 budget. Our reliance on two provincial grants, the Core Security and Prisoner Transportation Program and the Community Safety Policing Grant. Why this matters? Nearly half of this envelope's revenues come from these two grants. If the province changes amounts or confirms complete, we must adjust quickly mid-year. The Court Security Prisoner and Prisoner Transport is a mandated program which must be delivered by law, regardless of funding outcome. Should these two grants not be renewed, we will face a financial risk of $2.78 million. Our budget reflects the true cost of keeping people safe, securing our systems, and maintaining reliable response times. We drive efficiencies whenever we can. There are external factors, the cost drivers, that are beyond our control. Legislated mandates, insurance market conditions, the foreign exchange on USD price, parts, component parts, and licenses, vendor consolidation, committed contractual services with fixed escalators that often exceed CPI, statutory payroll deductions often rise faster than normal inflation. These factors may materially affect our budget. In short, our operating budget is a reliable snapshot of today's prices, not a guarantee against market movements. Any excess over our estimates is a financial risk. Our operating budget request reflects a 9.8% year-over-year increase, equal $3,704,600. That 9.8% is made up of two parts. I will walk through what that means in practice. The blue portion of the large pie chart represents base pressures. The 5.6% represent the cost that we must pay to stand still. If we just briefly roll 2025 forward, known pressures total 6.1%. Net increased revenue, the net of program expenses partially offset these pressures to land at 5.6%. The 4.2%, the red portion of the chart represents CSPA compliance costs. So, what's in the 5.6% standstill cost? contractual salary increases and benefit adjustments of 5.4%. Retiring healthcare costs up 45%. And statutory payroll deductions of 3.6%. The 4.2% combined cost for adequate staff level, mandatory training and certifications, and the technology infrastructure that form the backbone for investigating and solving modern crimes. Now let's move on to our capital budget. Our 2026 priorities are safety, compliance, and reliability across three major areas. Replacing end-of-life fleet assets, upgrading overdue radio interlink equipment at 3 transmitter sites, and implementing the technologies to reduce cybersecurity risk. Our 2011 prisoner van and 2011 motorcycle both have reached end of their economic life. The radio interlink equipment was scheduled to replace in 2023. The rise with cyber threats continue to rise in frequency and sophistication. We need to implement modern technologies to safeguard our data. Thank you for your attention. With that, I will invite our chief to continue.
Thank you, Tia. I'm going to leave this picture up here for a minute. So that's our prisoner van, as you can see. And when you look at the side of that prisoner van, that brown stuff at the bottom, that's the rust. On several occasions this year, we had to transport youth from court to a detention center because they were held in custody. And the closest detention center that had space was Sudbury. We couldn't use this vehicle because we weren't able to be sure it would actually get there and back. That's a concern for us. So that is one that was scheduled to be replaced a couple of years ago, and it has been deferred multiple times. It is at the end of useful life, and it no longer has the equipment inside of it that is required for the safety of the people who we are transporting. You heard about cybersecurity. That is a risk. We do know that if you just look, and you can Google those anywhere, of course, but you look down the road to Kingston, police suffered a cyber attack. They're still recovering from that millions of dollars later. The other direction, the city of Hamilton, which it was hit, I think they're up to estimated $14 million right now to try and get that on board. Woodstock police, well known that they were hit by cyber attack. Portal, closer to home, cyber attack. It is becoming increasingly common, and it is something that we've done a tremendous amount to try and shore up our concerns around that, but nobody is immune to those types of attacks. So those are things that we're vulnerable against, that cyber exposure. Of course, any sort of concerns around training and compliance gaps, because that is something we just can't abscond from that. We can't defer that. I can't have somebody investigate sex assault if they don't have the sex assault course. That is a 2-week course. They can't get the 2-week course until they've had the general investigative training course. That's a 3-week course. They can't move on to the next stage until they've had the 1-week investigators interviewing course. There are courses that are required all the way along before that person can be competent to investigate sexual assault. And those are things we want people to be competent doing. And that is a requirement we cannot move away from. Disclosure, as I talked about earlier, the reporting. We know that every time somebody's off the road to provide this training to them, somebody has to be paid to come and backfill that spot. A simple fact. If you are in training, somebody has to fill the front seat of that cruiser on our streets. We can't avoid that. It's not something that we can possibly move past. And then as we talked about, we already tapped into the reserves for over $800,000 in 2023, and we're trying to build that up to mitigate against some of those risks that Tia outlined. So how do we make each dollar count? Well, we do engage in multi-year procurement processes to try and secure the best possible price that we can get in terms of those contracts. That volume discount, we participate in the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, the Police Cooperative Purchasing Group, PCPG, because they negotiate at a higher level for police services across the province, trying to capitalize on the benefits of volume purchases. For example, we enjoy reduced costs for shirts, pants, those sorts of things. And it still costs $13,000. We're trying to move towards cloud optimization versus on-prem server sites where we can to get away from maintaining digital equipment that we know will be requiring some evergreen to move into what are we going to do to replace servers, how much server space, that sort of thing. When you think you can get a terabyte of memory on your iPhone, the newest iPhone or Google phones, that has to go somewhere when we download that information. The fuel savings, the right sizing of vehicles, we've been, every police service has been struggling trying to get vehicles that are hybrids. It has been a challenge. This year, it seems there is a bit of a turn, a bit of a shift, and we continue to pursue that so that we can reduce the amount of money we're spending on fuel and move to more of an electric style. But we can't put a cruiser on the road that requires a fully electric system, because that car's on the road 24 hours a day. There's no charge time available for that. But we are, where we can, going to a hybrid model. And what we can do, and what we are looking at doing as we can, just upfront cost, is moving to all electric for some of our administrative cars. Of course, that requires the infrastructure to charge them somewhere, which we don't currently have, but that's in part of our future plans as well. So it's all, everything's connected. We are moving towards those automation where we can, and of course, when it's possible, we collaborate with our friends in the city, around maintenance and insurance, and we've had some pretty successful collaborations out there. As Tia said, we're committed to transparency. We are committed to biannual reporting. I report that to my board. We will report things like response times. How is that? What is service availability looking like? What do our crime and clearance rates look like? We report that on a quarterly basis. What's training compliance look like? Because we have to provide that. What's our digital evidence turnaround and disclosure timelines look like? Do we have court cases that are in jeopardy as a result of times to get to disclosure, to get to trial? And then, of course, looking at service uptimes and cyber attacks, because we have to monitor what is our ongoing vulnerability and how do we shore up against that. So those are the things that we were doing towards transparency, towards ensuring that my board, my bosses, our governments is kept up to speed on what's happening. And those are all done in public. Those are public available meetings for you to be able to tune into. At some point in the future, when this room is done, this will be where you can actually come in person to watch a board meeting if you choose to do so. So I'm just going to end up, because we often get this question. So the last slide is really just an information slide. Many people ask us, how do we get in touch with the police? I can tell you the one thing that's not on here is social media. We don't watch social media for reports of crimes. Many people will try and report, hey, this happened in my neighborhood, police, can you do something about it? We don't have people, we don't have time or resources to be able to watch social media. It has to get reported through one of these ways. We have a new online reporting tool. I've heard frustration, people saying, I have to go through so many screens before I can report something. I understand that, but every one of those screens is what an officer is going to ask you if they would at your door. And so saving the time for some of those lower threshold crimes by reporting them online allows our officers to be able to get that calls, those priority calls, answered 1.5 seconds faster than what they were doing the year before. It is important. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to open the floor to questions and answers. We are at about the 45-minute mark, which I promised, which leaves us a good 45 minutes for Q&A if we're available for that. And Staff Inspector Sedgwick will be around the microphone so that others can hear that as well. Any questions? Thank you.
I don't know.
It's okay.
Yep, it's on.
The only question I really have, and there's a lot of numbers, I'm not gonna be able to claim to try to make sense of all of this. My concern, and I think sometimes some people's concerns might be, we're seeing, policing in itself is reactive, I get it. You have to, the crime has to exist before you guys deal with that. Where, am I missing, a preventative type of policies that might, or should be maybe in place in policing, so we can maybe ease some of these costs at all? Because I'm not seeing that here.
No, you're absolutely correct. Preventive crime prevention is a key component of our core responsibilities. We engage in crime prevention. There's no question about that. And we just were trying to present sort of the numbers piece today. Last year, when I tried to do some of those types of data slides, people didn't appreciate that. So I tried to just focus on the numbers, but I am appreciative of the fact that you brought that up. So we engage in a number of crime prevention initiatives out on the road. Sometimes it's just our police presence out on the road, that foot patrol, that bike patrol, that is prevention. You saw a bunch of auxiliary officers when you came in here today. Those are volunteers who have day jobs. But they will go out and do crime prevention initiatives on behalf of the police service. They will come to your house and do a security audit. They will come to your business and do a security audit. Here's what you can do. Here's how you could reduce the likelihood of being a victim of a crime. So those are the types of things that we're engaging in to provide crime prevention. The officers are always engaged in providing crime prevention tips. Some of that we do push out through different media sources, but mostly it's our presence that when we're trying to be very proactive. As you can see, there is no shortage of business. So quite often, if we're at this end, for example, of George Street, somebody with that end of the street isn't seeing us being present. Now, Safer Public Spaces is another initiative that we launched. So that one, I have a slide if you want to see it. Okay, good.
We'll take your word for
I'm
it.
excited, but I have a slide.
That's
Okay, but I can draw it. So in our last board meeting, I told my board that there are other communities that are copying what we're doing. I said, I can't mention the Southwestern Ontario or Southern Ontario community, but the most recent one that's copied us is Niagara, in the city of Niagara. So you can look that up. The mayor of Niagara Falls called me personally, the chief of police and I had a conversation. They said, we like what we're seeing, what the police are doing in Peterborough. How can we replicate that? And lo and behold, Chief Gordon, that's the chief of Niagara, he took what we did and he's implemented it fully in around Safer Public Spaces. We changed our entire policy around that. So for short history, for those who don't know, we were very following the OECD, CHCP sort of trend around harm reduction, around, hey, addictions, it's an illness, we know that. But it was a very hands-off kind of approach to how the police were dealing with it. We're part of the drug strategy, 4 pillars. We are the law enforcement pillar, but we were very much engaged with not enforcement, but more supporting the other pillars. In October of 2023, we shifted to I would call it a 90-degree turn that said, look, you can't do your drugs in public spaces. It's got to stop. There is a CTS where you can go. Does it address the inhalation? It does not, but it does address the injections. You have to go somewhere other than our parks, our playgrounds, our businesses, our storefronts, our bus stops. The entire province of British Columbia has made that shift, but it's in legislation. And that worked pretty well. But after 18 months, we saw a real decline in compliance. So on June 6th of this year, I attended every one of my officers' briefings, and I gave them new marching orders. So we went the other 90% of the way, or 90 degrees. And now the orders from the chief of police are, if you see or you receive a call of somebody using illicit drugs in public, you shall arrest. It is not discretionary. What is discretionary is if they choose to charge, and that would be based on the investigation that they have. But if somebody is using drugs in public, they shall be arrested because they are still illegal. The Controlled Drugs and Substances Act still considers them illegal. And so we're not going to turn a blind eye because our entire community needs to feel safe. We still provide information and education about where they can go. The fact of the matter is, they can't do it in those public spaces anymore. Now, the very first day, we had somebody going out arrested. In fact, one of our tactical team members happened to be driving right across from City Hall, came across somebody who was about to light him a meth, like do some crystal meth. And lo and behold, he was placed under arrest. His words to the officer was, "Oh, wait a minute, why am I being arrested? I thought you just gave me a warning." That has permeated thinking in that culture. And we're shifting that to say, no, enough is enough. It's time. We can't do those things in public. Now, you probably think, well, people are just going to go into dark hallways, dark alleyways, parks, they're going to overdose, and nobody's going to be there to save them. We've been tracking that too, because I do life data, and we track that. And I can tell you that is not the case. And in fact, here in the city of Peterborough, from year to year, from last year to the end of September of this year, we've actually seen a reduction of 32% of overdoses or suspected overdose by opioid in the city. The Public Officer of Health reports in the county and the catchment area. We look at what we're responsible for from a city perspective. We track that because the police have to attend every single sudden death. We attend every one of them. So we know. And we're involved in an investigation and we get the information from the coroner. So we know what the cause of death was. We know if it's opioid related. We know if it's not. We know how often Narcan is being issued by medical or emergency service professionals. It is also down. So we've been tracking these stats, and that's another way that we're working towards crime prevention. Our community first unit is out there doing proactive work to try and dissuade and address shoplifting that's happening in our stores. When we have check day, notorious check day, apparently seems to be a big problem in the downtown core. Our officers are out in force downtown on check day. A noticeable presence in and around the banks at the request and social services. So we're saying, can we please see more police time? So we do, we adjust. When we talk about being in the right place at the right time, we've adjusted for that. So those are some of the things we're doing. I hope that explains something.
No, I did. Thank you. That appreciate. Can I have one follow-up? I don't think okay. I'm just wondering, when you're saying that these people aren't doing drugs now in dark alleyways and, committing these crimes, where are they going? Like, they're not all in jail now, right? So where are they going?
Yeah, I'm not saying that they're not going into those dark alleyways and parks or different locations. I'm saying I'm not tolerating it in public spaces. I'm not naive to think that people have suddenly just stopped doing drugs. That isn't going to happen. Our leg of the Peterborough drug strategy is law enforcement. There are social services and medical health that are the other three legs. We're the law enforcement. We weren't keeping up our end. We're now working at making sure that of those four legs, we're going to uphold our end. We will support the other three legs as they continue to uphold their end. But our job is to ensure that the law is enforced. And we will do that.
Fair. What about, sorry, one more follow-up.
I'm
sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this because I think prevention is being proactive about this, including the social services arms of things, is really key. Because otherwise, and I've never seen a police budget ever decrease. So we're just going to continue, and next time it's going to increase and it's going to increase. So can you just state, would it be fair if we were able to put more money into the social services, mental health, addiction, housing, shelter? Would that help maybe offset some of the costs in the police budgets?
So the question being, if we invested more in social services and other services, would that offset reactive policing costs?
Right.
I can tell you with confidence, every chief of police in this country would say yes, and we would support that.
Yeah.
The problem is, you can't defund one and say, we're suddenly going to hire a whole bunch of social workers to go and do this, because they don't exist. They're not there. And there has to be a transition time. So there may be a pain point or a period of time if we're committed to doing that, where you're double funding as one gets up to capacity before the other can slowly withdraw. So that is something that the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, we all agree that upfront savings is a good idea. We absolutely do. What we do see, and this is what's interesting, our calls for service to assist EMS this year has skyrocketed in the 3-digit increases. Because when EMS is going to deal with some of these folks who are in crisis, They call the police to protect them from the very people they're helping. Because those situations, those chaotic drug users, when they're in that state or they're in a mental health crisis, are very unpredictable. And our EMS workers are seeing record levels of violence against them. So they call the police to come and protect them. So there will always be a need for an armed presence, but if we can reduce it, I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for putting this on for us. I'm just wondering, I might have missed it because I came in a little bit late, but I just wanted to know, what was your vision for sort of recommending this site among the other sites that, there was a report that went out that there was a ton of other sites that could have been built for the new station, and I'm just wondering what your vision was. And as another point in this question, I wanted to ask about the grants that you mentioned from the province and potentially the federal government. Those grants that you have, I know that they might not, you might not know if you're going to get them in the future, but like, was there sort of like a vision for this site to grow and for police services and the community to grow, for the province and the federal government to open up new units, or is this to be a bigger site?
Well, that's a multi-layered question, and I can't get into addressing all of it. This is about our budget, and the building site's about the police budget, but I don't see time hands up, so I will spend a bit of time on the policing and the building piece, okay? I'm not telling any tales out of school. So, there was, as you know, a call for a new police service and a police service building for years, like decades. And a single site solution was the preferred solution when I first arrived here. And you're right, there was a study done with the parameters of where can we put a single site solution. And that's what the study was there to identify. And so they looked at, okay, where can we find a footprint of land big enough for a single site solution? We knew that the solution that was ideal passed us by earlier in the 2016, 2017. That was the church beside the police station. That was the ideal location. It's vacant now, but it's unavailable. That was ideal. That site passed us by. So a number of other sites were identified. Not a single one of those other sites was currently available. So, and many of them had homes or businesses, and all of them were on contaminated land. So we would be looking at expropriation, remediation, before we could actually build. And so none of that. In fact, one of them recommended close down this road and close down this road, and you could build the police station. That was one of the preferred sites based on the criteria that the search firm was asked to look for. So knowing that none of those worked and that this building was available, it became a two-site solution where we didn't have to significantly increase the footprint at the existing location. And we could continue to renovate this half or this portion of the building and still achieve the same square footage that was recommended. The square footage is up by about 15,000 square feet because there is a small renovation required on the other building, but the total square footage is approximately the same as it was. At that time, we were identified as needing about 95,000 square feet. That was in 2019. Here we are 6 years later. The service has grown, the demands have grown, the expectations have grown. We have to grow too, hence the other 15,000 square feet. So that's how we ended up in a two-site solution. Now, this site happens to be ideal for a whole host of reasons. Number one, it provides business continuity. We've all experienced this ice storm and the vulnerabilities we were all at as a result of that. So this piece, if you don't know all that, this cat out of the bag, is on its own power grid outside of the rest of the city. If that police station goes down, we can maintain public safety by operating from this facility. That's a good backup starters, number one. Number two, we have no place to train people right now. We can't build that building bigger. We've already determined that, and the need is now. So this provides us an opportunity where we can actually provide that required training. Part of my approach to that was to bring the director and the assistant directors from the police college, OPC in Elmer, to come to this building and say, hey, we're building this facility. Would you, if we built it, will you come? It's a field of dreams. Will you come? Will you put on adult courses here in our location? It's ideal. We said, we're within walking distance of 2 hotels and every amenity you could possibly need for officers to come from the eastern half of the province to come here. Because I've listed all those courses, they have to be trained somewhere. We don't have that availability anywhere else. Now, we have been sending officers to other police departments. When we send them there, we paid their communities for the hotels. We paid them for the food. We paid them for that. I'm looking to avoid those costs by maximizing the use of the property. We are looking at, and you know, you're looking at chairs, furniture. You won't see it if you can't go through the rest of the building. We have little painter's tape patches on all the furniture that we can reuse. Because unlike any other city unit that I'm aware of, we reuse furniture. We buy used cars, believe it or not. Right? We do those things, again, to mitigate against the cost that Tia spoke about. How can we maximize our efficiency? So the intention there was to be able to achieve the same square footage and to be able to do it in a way that allowed us to maximize the likelihood of avoiding future costs and introducing new sources into the city in terms of other police services that come here. It is not going to be a basic constable training location, but all of those other courses require classrooms to be put on. The mental health training, for example, it has very specific requirements. You need a room half the size of this that's just empty, because there's virtual reality goggles that go along with that, and officers have to be able to move around a room, without tripping over chairs, without tripping over desks. It seems like a lot of wasted space, but we didn't come up with that in those dimensions. So these are the things that we're working with to try and get us compliant and then to maximize some of those other returns. So that's the vision for that. This is never intended to be an operational building. That would be a last resort, as I said, in an emergency situation like that. I can tell you, when we had this ice storm, that police station ran for 7 days on a generator. 911 into the city. That is the only 911 for all of Peterborough goes into that building, and it was on a diesel generator, not even on natural gas. Right? So that's it. Like, you're not getting fire, you're not getting ambulance if you don't have a police station that's operational 24 hours a day, 7 days. And that's what we were operating on. And hoping that that generator wouldn't die, because it's past its return and it's an expected life expectancy as well. But we're not going to replace it when we know that we're at this stage of things. And so we're limping things along as best we can. My officers will even tell you today, they told me we have a toilet in this building that our officers have access to. That is, what is it? Losing its integrity. And my direction is, okay, can you take a toilet from somewhere else in the building? Put it in that spot. And the answer is they're all losing their integrity. So, you know, we're working on not replacing things when we know that they're going to be dealt with as part of renovations. I hope that answers the question. It wasn't intended to be a question about police facilities, but there was an opportunity to provide a bit more context there.
Hi, it's Joelle from the Examiner. Budget talks are coming soon. I was wondering if you could say how much will be requested the city for 2026.
In terms of what our request will be?
Yeah.
Well, that's the 9.8%. Oops, well, not giving you a CD, those other slides, sorry. That was this slide control. Our budget request is 9.8%. Now, for the councillors in the room and the media, you'll know that when I came to in June, we were forecasting a 10.8%. So we were able to find some efficiencies. We really worked hard. You know that there was discussion about what about 15%? We didn't go 15%. We went the other direction to 9.8%. Now, if you want 15%, I can tell you what you get. But that's not what we're asking for. We're asking for what we need as the bare minimum. If you want more than the bare minimum, I'd say 15, another 5%. That's going to get you 8 officers on foot downtown from April to October and 2 detectives in the detective office to support them so that they can do their training in those off months. That's what the extra 5% gives you. It gives you 10 officers, 8 of whom are dedicated to nothing but foot patrol downtown. How's that?
How many dollars is that, 9.8%?
41 million.
The 9.8 is 41 million? Like a total budget?
Well, answer yourself.
Finally, you are able to go back to the first, the second slide, please? Thank you for being here. It's a much more relaxed slide than the last couple of presentations. Maybe it's the location.
It does bring some peace, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I'm trying to process this because I think that you said the chart, the overall charges were up from last year, but when I read these numbers, it looks like that column is down from the previous year.
I'm not sure what you're reading at.
Oh, year to date.
So this is year to date to September 30th. Here. Right? Because we have it at the end of the year. This is all of 2024. And this is the first 9 months of this year. And we're already up 29% over where we were at the same time last year.
Perfect, thank you. I guess it gives me time for one more quick question. Given your experience now so far, you know, you laid out what the budget requests for like prior to you coming here, and then what they have in the last couple of years, where do you see the trend going next year? Because we've experienced a couple of years with big asks. Do you see that these investments that we made are going to slow things down in the future?
That is my hope. And as you recall, when I came to council last year, I said, I can't come back with another double-digit budget request. So we worked hard to get below that double-digit budget request. I absolutely can appreciate where you were taking me in terms of that question. That's where I'd like to see us going. We had over a decade of essentially shrinkage. Right, Steve talked about shrinkage, so 3% wasn't even keeping up with the negotiated salaries and benefits that were part of the collective working agreement. We were not keeping up. So effectively what was happening is we were shrinking the size and the capacity of the police service. So we've had a few years where we were working on rebuilding and getting that capacity back up. Would I love to be able to add more people? Absolutely. Because do I think that it would provide more service? You bet. We are a people-powered police service. Our people serve the community. We don't get anything out of it other than that. The salaries are negotiated. That's fixed. Next year, they're fixed. They're a 5-year contract. That is not changing. Nobody gets bonuses. Nobody gets extra money. The only thing that we get with more money is the ability to provide more service. There's a direct link between the budget and what we can provide. That is the nexus there.
Hey, Chief, thanks for being here tonight. It's Councilor Brown. Two of the things that I'm hearing the most need for police in the West End is break-ins overnight and speeding in the West End. I know Councilor Ball went on board for the last couple of years to try to bring speed enforcement cameras in the city, which will so saying that the pressure for speeding relief in the West End, also speeding, that's going to fall back into place. Does this budget at all help to address having more officers out on the road in general overnight on patrol to maybe remediate some of that those break-ins or people walking around the streets in the neighborhoods, and as well the really long streets that we have, the Maryland Drive or Glen Forest or Heights, and some of those streets are the ones that we get constantly all of them. So does this budget address that at all, or also relieving those pressures on local residents?
So a couple of things going on there. It's break-ins, criminal, and then speeding traffic provincial. Misnomer there, the BNEs actually aren't, for the most part, in residential homes happening at night, because they happen to be modern. So you do get occasional break-in enters at night. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the volume tends to be happens during the day, and people discover them when they come home after having been away. In terms of traffic, well, it's no secret. The OACP, we support the proper and effective use of speed cameras. I'll just say that right now. I provided a quote for the city. I will say that I do support the proper and effective management and deployment of speed cameras in our community safety zones. They are always where our kids are. When we can put more of those in those locations and they're managed properly, and my understanding is some of this heat has become around some of the management of those cameras, they can be an effective deterrent, right? Because the head is where we all feel it. That's the pocketbook. they can be an effective deterrent. They are not the panacea to speeding. I don't think that's the case either. There are some traffic calming measures that can be done to help with that. But those kind of cost too. And then what a lot of people don't understand, of course, they put speed bumps on the road. That's going to impact snow plows and snow removal. And what does that look like? Same way you put chicanes around roads to try and slow vehicles down. So there's always a cost towards the preventative component. Our officers, I tell you, every new supervisor in my organization gets a sit-down meeting with me for at least an hour. And in that meeting is my expectations, and every one of them is shown a graph of our traffic enforcement. And every one of them is told it's unacceptable, because it is one of our top complaints. And yet, interestingly and paradoxically, when people say, I want more speed enforcement, we also get people say, but I never see cops doing criminal stuff. Now, why are they doing speed stuff? Right? So there's no winning. But the fact of the matter is that it's part of our job. It's part of my expectation. And our tickets are up this year. So our enforcement is up. But while we're responding to criminal calls, we can't be doing those traffic calls too. So we try and judiciously spread that around. We have a traffic unit that is responsive to when there are things happening. And when one of your councilor mates was in touch with me again just yesterday to say thank you for sending the officers up. Because we are responsive and we do track and we do work on those sorts of things as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
Chief, couple of clarifications. Either I heard it correctly or stated incorrectly. The 9.8 was said to be $41 million. That's not the 9% that doesn't represent $41 million of the full budget. Is that? I thought I heard someone say $41 million.
No, with the 9.8%, it goes to 41 million.
I got that. I just want to clarify that, Chief. Just for the benefit of some others, I know in terms of some of our meetings and board, we've heard of other police services who are looking at absolutely double-digit increases for this year. Are you sharing those percentages? Just generally speaking, relative to where we're at.
So on the low end, they're close to where we are right now. And then on the high end, you're right, we're talking mid to high teens in terms of what people are asking for. It would be appropriate for me to really out them because they're going through the same process as they've got in front of their boards and in front of their city councils. But I can tell you, we all talk and we were all very much alive to, oh, what are you asking for? What am I asking for? More are in double digits, I would say, than in the single digits again this year.
I think that's important to put the context sheet. The last thing, I'm wondering if you would be able to address the $91 million or $92 million that's reported in the media. That's not the cost of the two-site solution directly to the police. I wonder if you could just clarify that, because there's about a $10 million difference, Chief, from the 92 to the 81, and I wonder if you could take this opportunity just to enlighten the audience.
Okay, so buildings, I knew there'd be intense interest, and partly that's why we're also in the meeting here, so you have an opportunity to see this. So 91 million includes the entire purchase price of this site. Right? So we know that approximately 5 million of that $15.3 million purchase price, 5 million is for the police. So when we talk about, oh, it's 91 million, you might as well knock 10 million off that right away, because that 10 million doesn't attribute to the police. That is the city-owned component that isn't used for policing purposes. That will be city-owned asset property. This is all city-owned, but 5 million. And the price that was estimated to purchase for a new building in 2019 was approximately 4.3 million. And based on the inflation calculator from the Bank of Canada, we know that that already brings you up to the 5 million. So that's your first 91 down to 81. Then there are some things that are unavoidable costs that are included in that 91 million. Probably one of the more expensive is the green component of it. I think that's close to $8 million. I get it. We are in a climate emergency, but approximately $8 million is required to get us to acceptable levels with that. That's a city expectation in terms of building costs. We don't work with that, but that is built into the price. When we were first looking at the costs, that is where we were. In 2019, they estimated $66 million for a new building 6 years ago. If we were to look at Canadian Bank of Canada inflation calculator, it's available for all of us, you can do that. And you add in today's dollars, for yesterday, 2019 dollars, 66 million, in today's dollars, comes out to about $81 million. So that's where we're at. We were never at over. Now, I've been in policing nearly 3 decades. I've been in senior leadership and executive leadership for about 15 years. I've been involved in building and directly engaged with building 2 buildings in another big police service. As council will know, at that time, the last one I was involved with, they spent $81 million in 2010. And we were budgeted for $66 million in 2019. We were already under budgeted in 2019 for the same type of square footage that we were looking at needing for the police in here. We know that other police services are in the process of building police buildings. Sarnia is the chief among them. They've been very open in the newspaper. They are at about the same dollar figure as us, 91 million. We're not even 91 million. Back that back to at least 55 million. That's on the Class B pricing. So this is where we're at right now, and I hope that provides a little more context if you were looking for, councilors. Any other questions? Anybody know how much it costs to outfit a police car? I can tell you, a police car costs $30,000 to put equipment in that car. That's what it costs on top of the price of the car. It costs $30,000. We know that increasingly when we're dealing with people who are engaged in auto theft, they are prepared to rent these cars to get away. There's no consequence to them. It's 100% liability on us. We're seeing other police services in the GTA who are regularly writing off cars trying to stop criminals from fleeing. And we can't get cars fast enough because of socioeconomic issues that we have right now in North America. We can't get those cars. This is a challenge for us. But it costs us $30,000 for the equipment that's each and every one of those cars. We have found efficiency. On my street, sorry, it's not on yours. There you go. Those 2 really good people, but it's $30,000 to put that into a car.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up question about the cost sharing with the province that you had mentioned before, and perhaps like even the federal government. I'm just wondering, like, because you're building this new facility, you had also mentioned, you know, your officers have to go to other places for tourism. Like, can you just elaborate a little bit on that and the cost sharing element of the province and how that's restricting Peterborough at this point with the cameras and everything else?
Yes, we are. Well, let me first just take the federal side of no balls yet. Okay. We get virtually no money from the federal for policing. And yet criminal code is federal legislation. We get no money from the feds for that. They make the laws, we have to enforce them, but it's the municipality that pays for it. The province does provide us grant funding. There is risk and volatility around the grant funding they provide. Around 8 of our full-time employees are paid for every year by grants. We didn't have those grants. We are at risk of having to find the money to pay those individuals because they fall into very specific categories to qualify for those grants. So, for example, our hate crime investigator and our hate crime analyst are paid for by the grants. I couldn't get a grant for a frontline officer, but I can get a grant for a hate crime officer. I can get a grant for a sexual assault investigator. I can get a grant for an internet child exploitation investigator. I can't get a grant for a data clerk. I can't get a grant for a forensic identification officer. So we're really limited to who and what we can get grants for. We are constantly searching for grants. I've been quite vocal about my concerns about the equitable distribution of grants. So I'm just gonna use this form because I have to have a microphone to talk about that. So the small and mid-sized police services in this province, there are 43 municipal police services and 44 when you count the OPP, and 9 Indigenous police services that are self-run. So that is what we're looking at. Peterborough is a mid-sized police service. We are the 20th largest in this province. Out of those 43, 12 of them are considered, and you'll hear referred to as the big 12, because they are the biggest 12. And then the rest of us, another 30, 31 of us are small and mids. Everybody is competing for the same grants. If you have a $500 million budget, like your regional police, third largest police service, or $1 billion budget like Toronto, or a $41 million budget like Peterborough, we're all competing for the same grants. And depending on what you can write to and who has the ability to do it, you're going to get those grants. Now, small and mid-sized services are most often not receiving grant money in the same amount as the big services. And quite frankly, a lot of those big services have a capacity, and they have people who do nothing but write for grants. When we do it, it's off the side of somebody's desk. We have a new person here in our strategic communications. She helps with that. I help write the grants because there's nobody else to do it.
Is that something that would be worth funding?
It could be, but what we're trying to get from the provincial government is a commitment for equitable distribution of grant funding. So now we'll throw the OPP into the mix. They're the biggest police service in this province. They are also eligible for the grants, and they are directly reporting to the Solicitor General. So we have an OPP detachment here. So every detachment can apply for a grant. So the OPP detachment in the city of Peterborough can apply for the same grants that we are applying for. And they're funded provincially. We're funded municipally. We apply for those grants and there is no guarantee. You talk about CCTV cameras. So we rolled CCTV cameras into our community safety priorities grant funding. We were able to get it because we had applied for it in the previous CCTV camera grant and we were unsuccessful. With no explanation why. You just said, sorry, you're not successful. We have been successful in achieving and obtaining grants for our mental health crisis intervention team. That's another example of shifting to an appropriate response. That's not always a police response. We're there with them, but they could provide that intervention. So we're all competing for that same pool of money. Often what happens, so late last year, everybody will know auto theft was a big issue in the GTA. It was everywhere. It spurred on the 10 helicopters that the province is putting funding across the province. We didn't have an auto theft problem. I couldn't qualify for the grant, so we didn't write for the grant. We wrote for a different grant. And the big police services, they wrote for those grants because sure enough, they have a big problem. Then when there was a grant that came out that we applied for it, so did the big services. They got the grant, we did. That is a real challenge for us. We do an awful lot of advocacy around that. We are constantly, so when I say we, the 31 small and mid-sized police services are spending an awful lot of time saying, hey, there is an inequity because every one of our municipalities is required to provide adequate effective policing. And if you've got a $500 million budget, you have a greater likelihood of being able to provide that. I know I worked at York Regional Police. I ran the police station in the city of Vaughan. I have more people in my police station than we have in our entire police department, just out of that one station for that city. And then all the other resources. I ran the helicopter unit. I ran the air support unit with their airplane and their 14 police dogs. And yet they will apply for a grant for police dogs the same as we do when we're desperately in need of it and will have a greater impact on these communities. So there is a real need for that. There is a role for our boards. I know that they submit correspondence. There is a role for our city council at province meetings, at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. We need the city to be able to advocate for equitable and fair funding because we are all required to provide the same level of police service regardless of their ability to pay. So ability to pay used to be in the old Police Act. They took that out in this new Police Act. Now it just says you have to provide adequate and effective policing. for the community you're in. It's a very different social wording. So, yeah, grant funding is a constant source for us. We look for private ventures, or shout out to Firehouse Subs. They put out a grant. We recently applied for grant funding through Firehouse Subs because they do a public safety grant. And so we're trying for one of those. Anywhere where there is money to be had, we are looking as ways to bring that into our community to offset those costs. Okay, looks like that's a wrap. The next time I talk about budget will be at our board meeting, where our board will officially give me the marching orders to go forward with the city, and then it'll be in front of city council. So, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your questions. Appreciate it.